welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story coming from California and from one of our favorite, the Honorable Mr. Wiener. I believe that is the technical name and credit that he deserves as a Senate member of California. So, he's talking about making sure that police officers don't wear masks when they are doing their duties. It's an interesting conversation, especially with the riots going on. We're going to jump on into it. It's a story from Breitbart. But first, we're going to ask about our daily delight, which is the anonymity that the internet provides has made people very used to the fact that they do not have to claim their words. Then again, this is something from the founders that they had pen names in order to write articles and criticize the government. Then again, you could say this is a holdover from when they were facing a tyrannical government. These people persisted in their methods throughout the early parts of the United States. But there was a sense of accountability that came in throughout the 1920s, 1930s. And of course, there are anonymous authors, but there is a societal value of being one to claim your words and be bold enough to stand behind them. And the question of whether or not people should be allowed to wear masks at these protests at all on either side actually is something that I think we take for granted as a question. I think many people would have different opinions on it, especially on what generation that you were born in. So with that, throw your comments down there, throw your opinions down there. Should they be able to? Should they not to? The cops, the protesters, everything. So with that said, let's read the headline from Breitbart. Quote, California state senator proposes ban on law enforcement wearing masks, no secret police. Now, his framing is a bit over the top, but I think in general, he's actually getting onto something here. So we're going to go into one of the tweets that he put out. Quote, we're announcing new legislation, the No Secret Police Act, or SB 627, to ban local, state, federal law enforcement with some exceptions from covering their faces when interacting with the public and require them to wear identifying info. Secret police behavior tanks trust and must end, he wrote. So we're going to end there. Let's talk about the principle of the matter before we get into the technicalities, because technicality is that a state government cannot actually tell federal law enforcement how they have to operate. But the point overall, the principle overall, is that the people who are doing the law enforcement should be accountable. They should not be able to get away with wearing masks and not be identifiable. I think that this is a completely fair check on the government itself. Now, when it comes to what we put into law, I think we should put into law more often than not restrictions on the government itself. Rather than saying the citizens can or cannot do this, it is a question of what the government can or cannot do, and more often than not, I would prefer that it is cannot do, because as a society, we have a government in order to operate with one another, to protect our private property, to have and enforce a judicial system that allows us to cooperate and have a system that reinforces the trust that we should have in one another. But especially as a society gets larger, we have to have a mechanism to actually enforce some of the rules that we want to have as a society. That does not mean that we can randomly hand out power to the government in order to infringe upon our rights. I take that back. We can. We have done it. That doesn't mean we should. And in this case, I think this is a clear restriction on government itself, which is fair. And the argument from people who would support this, and it's a fair one, is that these officers are getting doxxed, that these officers are getting their addresses put online, they're getting harassed. This is all fair enough. But guess what? Doxing is already a crime, and you can go and prosecute the people that put that information out online. Guess what? You're not actually, by allowing officers to wear these masks, you're not actually stopping the doxing. And what I mean by that is you can, of course, stop the initial attempts at doxing, but these people are still going to try to find this information because they believe that these police officers are doing something heinous. And now you're going to have an even smaller segment of that population that believes that this is unlawful and that they're quote unquote secret police, especially when Scott Wiener is using such inflammatory language here, that are going to continue and go on and find the information if they can anyway. They're going to follow them. They're going to track them down. They're going to watch watch them as they go on their break, whatever it may be. Rather, why not dissuade them? One, it is your duty to protect the public in most cases, protect public spaces, especially in the case of federal law enforcement. It is to protect the federal buildings for the most part. Or in ICE's case, it is to do these immigration raids, so on and so forth. And you should be accountable. You are not a lone individual who is trying to right a wrong. You are a tool of the system, and therefore you should not be unaccountable. And let's be clear, like I said, the doxing will happen anyway, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that the wearing the mask doesn't make it at least a little bit harder, and it also provides some sort of shield that can materially affect how officers perceive their interactions, and then they could possibly think that they have less accountability when wearing one of these masks because they are less identifiable, even though people will still go through the process. Now, let's go to the inverse. Should protesters be allowed to wear masks? I think it is a gross overreach of the government to say that these people, when assembling how they are not allowed to wear masks. You have a right to anonymity. You have a right to privacy. You are also engaging in potential violent protests. Then again, if you are actually doing that, then there are laws on the books that say you can be booked no matter what the masks you're wearing are, and if cops see you doing it, then they can arrest you, and they can remove your mask in order to be able to properly identify you. But let's move beyond just the government, because like I said earlier, the example I provided was restricting the government itself versus the government restricting the people. I think there's a clear delineation here. This, in one case, in the cops' case, is restricting the government. In the other case is restricting the people. But does that mean on a ethical, societal level, that is how it should operate? No. I think if you are willing to go out and protest, and let's be clear, you probably aren't willing to, most people aren't just going out there to riot. I want to believe in the better nature of some people, though, of course, there are bad actors among all of them. But if you're going out to protest, you should be more than willing to stand behind your values. You are participating in one of the greatest privileges that we have here in the United States. And in order to keep that trust, which was a very interesting word that Wiener used, you also have to be someone who does not have that cloak of anonymity in order to feel emboldened when doing certain things, just as the argument would go for the cops who may be emboldened when they are wearing a mask. You have to be trustworthy. You have to be an honest participant. You have to be willing to back your words, in my opinion, in order to be a prime example of what living up to this protest culture we have is, and also to actually be a stalwart defender of your values, because anonymity is fine. And I understand that there are negative repercussions beyond this, which is your employer may find your photos or your videos. But if you're not willing to go out and protest without those repercussions, or with those repercussions, meaning you don't wear your mask and therefore you could lose your job, if your principles and values are not more valuable to you or more important to you than your job, are you actually holding them, and should you be protesting about them? I understand there's a very interesting delineation there, and I think that's a values question. But in my opinion, I think these protesters should also not be wearing masks. I'm not saying we ban it. I'm saying that if you are a protester, you need to take accountability for what you're doing, but also it's not just about accountability. It is about truly believing in what you're going out there and doing. You are causing civil unrest. You should be, if you're a protester, you should be willing to actually get a disorderly conduct violation. It varies from state to state, but you should be willing to do civil unrest, which is not necessarily to be violent, but to get in the way and inconvenience people in order to make sure that your message is heard. And sometimes that inconvenience also falls on you because you are doing something that is not within the norm, that may be perceived as illegal, or in some cases is in the gray area and therefore will have to be litigated before you are out. But this is accountability culture. I think it really comes down to this. And though Scott Wiener comes at it from a different angle, in the most general sense, I agree with the statement that the cops should not have masks on. They should be limited from doing so. And let's be clear, I understand a state level doesn't actually have ability to affect federal troops. I think this should be something that we implement on the federal level as well. And also, I think protesters, when going out, once again, not a government edict because it's restriction on the people directly, though I do believe that you need to really take it to heart if you're out there protesting and you're wearing a mask. Do you believe in this cause enough? And also, maybe it's a mechanism for accountability. If you take that mask off, maybe you'll be a little bit more civil. Maybe you're already civil as it is, and then you really should have nothing to worry about except for the natural repercussions of a protest that naturally gets in the way or actively gets in the way of people's lives in order to draw attention to your issue. So, with that said, I think we're going to leave on that note. We're not going to do a daily delight today. We are going to actually acknowledge what's going on between Israel and Iran. Obviously, U.S. citizens are in Israel. Military members are in different bases all across the Middle East. So we wish them well. We wish well to both citizen populations of both country so that we do not haplessly lose lives. But with that said, if you want to check out the podcast on Spotify, Podcast, Podvine, you can find all those links in the description below. That like and subscribe button down there. You can also find the article from today, so you can read the entire thing in its majestic 1 or 2 page from Breitbart. Also down there, you can find the link to 6 and 6, which is 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. It's international news, and that comes out every Tuesday and Thursday around the same time, which is noon. So, with that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.